Good New Year's to you on this second day of 2025. And what a day to have to come in and begin to report. Normally I'm pretty ebullient. I talk about football games. I certainly did enjoy the Ohio State Buckeyes romping at the Rose Bowl yesterday. But I have to talk about the largest terror attack in the United States in probably a decade. The Pulse nightclub was in 2016, and that was a jihadi attack that murdered, I believe, 49 people. So, not since then have we had a jihadi attack of this size. 15 people dead in New Orleans. The investigation is ongoing. No idea yet whether there is a connection to the explosion of the Cybertruck in front of the Trump Hotel. There is no connection to a nightclub shooting overnight in New York City where 10 people or 11 people were wounded outside of a nightclub. That looks like a gang fight. It's not terrorism. But the New Orleans attack is most definitely terrorism. I want to begin, though it's not particularly encouraging. I want you to hear what President Biden stumbled through yesterday as he attempted to make a statement on the events in New Orleans and Las Vegas. Here is the president yesterday afternoon, cut 13.
Good evening. I know I can speak for all Americans when I say our hearts are with the people of New Orleans after the despicable attack that occurred in the early morning hours. To all the families of those who were killed, to all those who were injured, to all the people of New Orleans who are grieving today, I want you to know I grieve with you. Our nation grieves with you. We're going to stand with you as you mourn and as you heal in the weeks to come. I want to thank our brave first responders and law enforcement personnel who stopped the attacker in his tracks before he could kill or injure even more people. I want to thank you to everyone at the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, including the FBI, for working nonstop to investigate this heinous act. The FBI is leading the investigation to determine what happened, why it happened, and whether there was any continuing threat to public safety. Here's what we know so far. The FBI has reported to me the killer was an American citizen, born in Texas. He served in the United States Army on active duty for many years. He also served in the Army Reserve until a few years ago. The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill. The ISIS flag was found in his vehicle, which he rented to conduct this attack. Possible explosives were found in the vehicle as well, and more explosives were found nearby. The situation is very fluid, and the investigation has a preliminary stage. And the fact is that right now, there you go. The law enforcement and intelligence community are continuing to look for any connections, associations, or co-conspirators. We have nothing additional to report at this time. The investigation is continuing to be active, and no one should jump to conclusions. I've directed my Attorney General, the FBI Director, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, and the intelligence community to work on this intensively until we have a full and complete information. And once we have that information, I will share that information as soon as we can confirm it. Additionally, we're tracking the explosion of a Cybertruck outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. Law enforcement and the intelligence community are investigating this as well, including whether there's any possible connection with the attack in New Orleans. Thus far, there's nothing to report on that score at this time. I've directed my team to make sure every resource is made available to federal, state, and local law enforcement to complete the investigation in New Orleans quickly and to make sure there's no remaining threat to the American people. And we'll support the people of New Orleans as they begin the hard work of healing. New Orleans is a place unlike any other place in the world. It's a city full of charm and joy. So many people around the world love New Orleans because of its history, its culture, and above all, its people. So I know, while this person committed a terrible assault on the city, the spirit of our New Orleans will never, never, never be defeated. It always will shine forth. We've seen that time and time again throughout its history, and I know we'll see it again in the days and weeks ahead. May God bless the people of New Orleans. May God bless our police and our first responders. May God protect our troops, and we'll keep you fully, contemporaneously informed. Thank you.
Have you spoken to President Trump?
Then, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, the president exits stage right in a rather infirm fashion. Look, he didn't tell us anything except that he shouldn't be president. And what we know is that he shouldn't be president. He should have resigned months ago. But in the meantime, hopefully Christopher Wray is assigning good agents. I was not particularly encouraged to watch Althea Duncan yesterday. Here's her first appearance yesterday morning, cut 6.
Kirkpatrick said we'll be taking over the investigative lead for this.
Oh, we don't have the audio on that.
This is not a terrorist event.
Is cut number 7, the 11. In their first appearance, she said this was not an act of terrorism. Her voice was trembling. We'll try and fix it for you. It just, you wonder yourself, how can she be the assistant special agent in charge? And oh, by the way, where is the special agent in charge? It's January 1. It's New Year's Eve in New Orleans. I expect everyone to be working for the Bureau. Then we've got Evan Perez on CNN with Phil Mattingly with this detail, cut number 14.
Well, the key question, obviously, is the help, the additional associates that the FBI assistant special agent in charge was mentioning. And what we know at this point, Phil, is that they have the FBI has recovered video, surveillance video that appears to show three men and one woman appearing to help put IEDs, what are believed to be IEDs, at locations in the French Quarter. Now, we heard from the FBI there that there were additional potential explosives that were found during a search later this morning, and they were rendered safe during the day today. And so what he threw out there was that there are 4 accomplices. I have not been able to confirm that this morning, but of course that would suggest to us why the Sugar Bowl was postponed until today if they're worried about accomplices and additional acts of terror. Immediately, some things are self-evident. Cybertrucks don't blow up in front of the Trump Hotel unless it's an act of terror. It didn't kill anyone. That is good. It is bad if people say, nothing to see here, move on. John Kennedy is on the case, and I like that. Here's Senator Kennedy on Fox News last night, cut number 12.
Final question here for not just people in Louisiana that are watching, but people coast to coast that are watching tonight. Are you getting the sense that there's any threat of any other potential attacks tonight on any other major cities?
I can't answer that. I can, but I won't.
Is New Orleans safe tonight?
Yes, but we're still in the process of tightening up security. We're still in the process of doing everything that we possibly can. The governor's called out the National Guard. We've got more FBI coming. We've got Homeland Security people. We've got state troopers who've done an awesome job. We've got the NOPD. We're doing everything we can, but like I say, there's a lot of information out there. Some of it's accurate.
Some of it's accurate, and we do not want to give out inaccurate information, but we will continue to follow any development throughout the day. Relief Factor time. If you are a regular to this program, you know, yesterday we began the new year. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I did down at the ocean. It was a little bit chilly and froggy, but we were happy to be out there and got our miles in, our good 4. And the implacable hill awaits me today. So I've got my Icarian curcumin, resveratrol, omega. I start the morning by taking it and telling you that you will thank me if your New Year's resolution includes exercise of any sort. I hope you didn't make one of those resolutions that you can end up having broken this week, but maybe, 5 miles a week, 10 miles a week you're going to walk. Do one resolution that works. Call up Relief Factor, 1-800 the number relief, 1-800 the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or visit their website and find that 3-week starter pack. All right, just 3 weeks. Try it for 3 weeks at the start of this year, because if you do something like the implacable hill, it stays with you for a couple of days, a little bit of soreness. But the minor aches and pains that come with doing good work, good workouts, more than worth it. Keep yourself in shape, go the distance, be able to enjoy life, not struggle through it with minor aches and pains that ought to be gone away with. Head over to the Relief Factor website and find that starter pack for 3 weeks at $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. We come back, I'll check in with the sheriff in Las Vegas and what he had to tell us last night. On the day after the biggest terror attack in the United States since the Orlando Pulse nightclub, 15 dead in New Orleans. The investigation is underway. Meanwhile, the sheriff of Las Vegas gave a press conference last night about what happened at the Trump Hotel there, cut number 5. Police Chief Kevin McMahill.
You know, you've heard some of the details today, and over the last 24 hours, we had...
Strike that. That's the wrong police chief. I'm looking for Kevin McMahill, cut number 3.
As you know, we just had our New Year's Eve event where we successfully protected the city, where over 400,000 people were here last night. And that changed this morning at about 8:40 when a 2024 Tesla Cybertruck pulled into the area valet of the Trump International Hotel. Very quickly thereafter that, the driver, who was the sole occupant of the truck, we saw what looked like maybe some sort of smoke, and then the truck exploded. Smoke was coming from inside of the truck after we noticed the flash and the explosion, and I'm going to show you that first video. That's the Cybertruck parked right in front of the doors. Can you play that again,
Looking
Carlos?
at a video. And it doesn't really show very well if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. Just smoke coming out of the front of the Trump Hotel.
So the individual that was in that truck is obviously deceased, still in the truck as we speak here today. Our fire department folks, Engine 12, a number of others, you'll hear from one of the fire chiefs here in just a moment, arrived very quickly along with my officers. And obviously we knew that we had a much larger event than just a vehicle fire. And so there's going to be a drone video that plays to my left again. You'll see as the fire initially, they covered it with the tarp to try to get it to go out. Once the fire went out through the suppression efforts of the fire department, you'll see some of the evidence in the back of the vehicle.
And then he's again watching off to the
canisters. They are camp fuel canisters and large firework mortars.
Hard to believe this isn't terrorism.
But I also would like you to pay attention to on that video, as you see that, it looks like the exterior of that truck is completely intact as it sits there. The fact that this was a cyber truck really limited the damage that occurred inside of the valet, because it had most of the blasts go up through the truck and out. In fact, if you look on that video, you'll see that the front glass doors at the Trump Hotel were not even broken by that blast, which they were parked directly in front of. You can see that in the video there.
And again, he's back to the video and not telling us about anything that we don't already know, but I feel confident.
I'm very well aware that there's a name already been reported out into the media. I am not going to confirm any names to you as I sit here today, because I cannot do that with 100% certainty of who the individual is. What I can tell you is we do know the truck was rented in Colorado. We were able to trace that truck through the Tesla charging stations, and it arrived here in Las Vegas this morning at about 7:30 and went up and down Las Vegas Boulevard before immediately pulling into the Trump Towers. Unfortunately, there were 7 people that reported injuries during this incident. All of them still remain as minor injuries and were treated at UMC. I would like to thank the Resorts World, because, as you know, we had to close down the Trump and evacuate it, as well as the Fashion Show Mall. And the Resorts World was very gracious in taking those hundreds of individuals in over there, housing them and feeding them prior to us being able to completely clear the hotel. The hotel and fashion show are back open for business. The Trump will remain closed as we continue this lengthy investigation as we move forward.
An investigation is underway into whether or not there is a link between the New Orleans attack and the explosion in Las Vegas. Now, I'm a common sense guy. We do not speculate, but it is obvious to me that that's terrorism at the Trump Hotel, and we know it's terrorism in New Orleans. I don't know that it's obvious to anyone that there's a connection. I do know that they're going to look into that. We'll find out more about it. I wish I had more confidence in the Bureau. I just don't. I'll come back with the Althea Duncan audio and your phone calls, 1-800-520-1234. What do you expect today and tomorrow? 1-800-520-1234. And do you think Kash Patel should be the first person confirmed? Because it's looking that way to me. We better get the Attorney General and Kash Patel confirmed right away. I'm not spending a lot of time telling you the names of the victim because only a few, like Nikra Diado, have been released. Tiger Batch, bond dealer, down 28 years old, Princeton football player. Reggie Hunter, 37-year-old father of two. Nicole Perez, single mother to a 4-year-old son. But the list of victims in New Orleans, not comprehensive yet. I could not have asked for a better caller than Detective Tom, who's up and working this morning in Oakland. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
Yes, sir. I didn't hear the entire your entire opening. Quickly give me the timeline. I know the New Orleans attack took place around 0300. When did the Las Vegas attack take place approximately?
I believe about 8 o'clock in the morning, but I'll ask Dwayne to check that.
You can rule out copycat then. All right, that's not enough time. So you rule out copycat. Look, there's a connection. What are the odds that you're going to have two car bombs or two vehicles that are used as essentially IEDs on the same day, New Year's Eve, and then New Year's morning? Forget it. There is a connection. I don't know where it is, but there is a connection.
Well, I agree with that. That's sort of like when the second plane hit the World Trade Center on 9/11. You knew it went from an accident to terrorism instantly. And I had the same conclusion. I don't really expect the FBI to be up and running and forthcoming. I don't know if you saw the opening of the press conference by the Assistant Special Agent in charge yesterday. It was not one to fill you with confidence. Did you see that, Tom?
I don't pay any attention to the Federal Bureau of Investigation right now, to be perfectly honest, with good reason. They should not be on the case. Give it to BATF. This is an explosive. These explosives were used. They are more than capable of handling the investigation. If the FBI wants to be used in a secondary supportive role, fine. But right now, I am sorry, they are a tainted group.
Well, just
FBI
listen. I'm going to just listen to this. Cut number 6. This is Althea Duncan at the very first press gathering after a truck drives down Bourbon Street at 3:15 in the morning and kills 15 people. Let's play it.
Kirkpatrick said we'll be taking over the investigative lead for this event. This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found, and we are working on confirming if this is a viable device or not. As Chief Kirkpatrick said, we're asking everyone to stay away from Bourbon Street, specifically from Canal Street to St. Anne. That is my ask. Once again, stay away from Bourbon Street, Canal Street, all the way to St. Anne until we can figure out what is going on. Our goal is to provide you additional information at the 11 a.m. press conference.
All right, not inspiring. She's nervous. She's young.
Okay, look, I don't care that their first public response is it's not a terrorist attack. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. Just because it's like sitting there saying every time there is a suicide, you begin to rule it as a homicide until all other expectations are proven otherwise. So if she wants to say it's not a terrorist attack, fine, you can start that. But I'm more interested in the secondary reports, is if there were associates or Confederates placing other IEDs in the area. If there's anything to that. Look, I don't trust the FBI. I can't express that clearly enough to you.
Why?
I can't.
Why?
Jesus, you don't know why?
Well, I know why I don't
We
trust
still have a-
Washington D.C., but I do believe their field agents are often extraordinary
Okay, fine.
professionals.
Fine. They're capable of going ahead and putting together the information file and sending it up the chain of command. What happens after that, I do not trust. Have we caught the bombers, the alleged bombers who went ahead and put pipe bombs in front of the DNC and the RNC 4 years ago? I mean,
No, and the first question I asked is, remember Las Vegas? We had a shooter in a hotel about which we've never heard anything. He killed scores of people.
Haven't heard anything much about the first Trump assassination.
That I was just about to
Back
say. Didn't the comic on New Year's Eve, the clip that went viral, it said he didn't have any silverware in his house, which is kind of odd. It just is there's a lot of confidence to be rebuilt in the Bureau about what they don't tell us. That's what people have curiosity about. What is not being told.
Okay, so what is not being told is they don't want to go ahead and tell you yet, by the way. Doesn't Notre Dame play Georgia? Isn't there a Super Bowl coming up in New Orleans?
Yes, there is. There's a Notre Dame-Georgia game today.
They're going to want to be very, very careful. Plus, you have an inauguration. You're going to want to be very careful that this isn't some trend that this starts something, okay? So they want time to go ahead and marshal their forces, particularly down in New Orleans, to go ahead and make sure they get all of the manpower that is necessary. You had Senator Kennedy. You had a clip of Senator Kennedy, correct?
Yep.
He said, is New Orleans safe? Because I can't answer that, or I don't know yet.
Yeah, he actually intimated that there was a lot more to come out, and that he's not allowed to do it. Did you get any bulletins, Tom? Did you get any alerts for Oakland or the Bay Area?
I'm sure they got them upstairs, especially for Homeland Security for New Year's Eve. That's a main one anyway, right? But nothing now. You know, the 5 alarm will go out, right? So everyone be on your six. Pay attention. What's going on? If you see something, say something. Look, these things come in waves. It's my experience anyway. Look for a possible copycat down the line. But my initial, as a former robbery homicide, is these two cases are connected. All right. And I don't trust the people who are investigating it right now. So I don't know what is going to happen with this. By the way, was the second suspect killed?
Yes, he was dead in the vehicle. Dead in the vehicle.
So this could have been a potential terrorist suicide type of thing. But they're connected. They're connected some way, somehow.
That was my intuition, but you're the professional. I'm glad you confirmed it. It just doesn't happen. You don't have 2 attacks on the same first day of the new year.
No,
in major cities.
Not with the same MO of vehicles. It's just to look. Be on the lookout. My next thing would be worried about the. I think New Orleans will be okay for today's game because of the National Guard out there. But I guess the next thing you look out for is the inauguration. That's the 20th or whatever it is.
And again, if it's actually coordinated sleeper cells, we will go back. Now, Tom, I have one question. There's an individual.
The border's still wide open, by the way. Go ahead.
I know. Will we discover anything about the killer? I know he's an Army vet. I know where he worked, etc. Will we find anything about his psychosis or his radicalization ever?
Well, what's being fed so far to us online is that he's been recently radicalized. Correct.
But they don't give you any details.
All right, we're going to have to pull the string and see where that thread leads us. I don't know. Is he talking to somebody? Is he talking to ISIS in Syria? I don't know. That's not my bailiwick. But
the president alluded to online postings, but given that he doesn't know what he's reading, he didn't elaborate on the details.
Okay, well, I'm sure the feds have gone ahead and conducted a search warrant and collected all his electronic devices, and any associates or Confederates he has are going to be collected up and questioned.
All right. Last question for you. This is the most disturbing thing. I was talking to the fetching Mr. Hewitt last night. The press, in the person, I believe, of the AP at least, and others, were at the suspect's home before the Bureau showed up with the search warrant.
How is that possible?
Well, the name leaked out, and they went there. And the FBI didn't.
Well, yeah, but you got to take time to go get a search warrant. You just can't go ahead and get in front of a federal judge and 20 minutes and sign it. I guess if it's a FISA.
But wouldn't you send someone over there right away so that no one walked into the house?
You generally would send Houston PD over there to go ahead and sit on the house, but or one of the detectives. Okay, all right. So the press got out. It happens. Did the press? Did they taint the scene? Did they enter the dwelling?
No, they didn't get into the house. No, and but it's really kind of extraordinary. But we do need to get Kash Patel confirmed in a hurry, and I don't know how they restore confidence in the bureau. Because
get new guys in there. You get new guys in there. You have to have a purge. I'm telling you.
I agree with you. If every other place that you need to turn the culture around, you begin by saying to everyone, "Thank you very much. You're going to a field office in Anchorage or some other place that's remote." Hey, Tom, Happy New Year. Are you working today?
I'm coming home right now.
Oh, geez. Was it a wild night or was it a quiet night?
No, Oakland actually because it's the first. So all the fun ended about 7 a.m. this morning. So I was pretty good last night.
Did you have to work on New Year's Eve?
I did not.
That's the benefits of seniority.
I didn't do anything either. So I guess that was the benefit of doing.
Are you going to miss us when we move to the afternoons? Tom, you'll be listening from noon to 3?
No, you can be replaced. You were on probation from Bill Bennett. It's next man up. Yeah, I'll catch you. Don't worry. I'll be around.
All right, I need you to call once in a while with your dose of clarity. Detective Tom from Oakland. Thank you, friend.
All right.
I want to go to the second Althea Duncan presser. Let's play them back to back. Cut number 6, Althea Duncan at the first presser. Cut number 6.
Kirkpatrick said we'll be taking over the investigative lead for this event. This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive
I do not know
devices.
Is there a bureau manual that says declare that it's not a terrorist event, even when it sure looks like that? Cut number 7.
This is an ongoing investigation that's rapidly evolving. So there are some questions I will be unable to answer at this time. The FBI is the lead investigative agency, and we're investigating this as an attack of terrorism along with our partners.
All right, so she changed her mind in 3 hours. Senator Kennedy is standing there with her. And I'm just here to tell you I do not have confidence in Ms. Duncan because her first words were, it's not an act of terrorism. And 3 hours later, it is an act of terrorism. I don't know what the deal is with the Bureau. They can just show up and say, we don't know anything yet. Stand by. We'll tell you as much as we know as soon as we know. And not rule out terrorism. It's okay to say, my eyes suggest to me that it's terrorism, but it might be a schizophrenic break, and it might be this individual just lost touch with reality. He's a veteran who was honorably discharged, did wonderful service in the United States Army. We do not know what happened to him. We will continue to investigate and update that and find out from his family whether or not there were recent evidences of a psychotic break or that sort of thing. I will tell you this. If either the attacker in Las Vegas or the attacker in New Orleans had used a long gun and only a long gun, we would know everything about them, and the usual suspects would be out talking about gun control. But because of terrorism, the usual suspects are not out. 1-800-520-1234. Have I missed something? Give me a call, 1-800-520-1234. Connection to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Dr. Michael Oren, former ambassador of Israel to the United States, joins me. Good morning, Dr. Oren. Happy New Year. My first question is a sad one. When you read the details of the attack in New Orleans, what do you think about the killer who radicalized himself in the aftermath of the financial collapse of his company and many other details that are emerging?
Good to be with you, Hugh. Happy New Year. And in spite of the tragedy, it's very important. We have to keep celebrating and not, let the terrorists win by preventing us from celebrating and being with our friends and family at this important time. What I think is that anybody who thinks that the United States can pull out of the Middle East is deluding himself. The Middle East is coming to a neighborhood near you now or in the near future. And it's like, in a way, it's like certain termites. You see one, there's got to be more. And I don't think this is my gut feeling tells me this is not a lone wolf operation. This is a person who's coordinated, and I know what the connection is, whether they're finding a connection between this attack and the planned attack in New Orleans, in Las Vegas, rather. it seems to me that the United States has to be extremely vigilant. That ISIS, and not just ISIS, the Iranians have an overseas branch that tries to carry out assassinations, whether of the former president, the president-elect, or even me. They try to assassinate me in downtown Washington. The terrorists are operating on American soil, and there should be absolutely no delusions about it.
What is your confidence level in the FBI? I know you've known previous FBI directors, and of course, you know your own Shin Bet and Mossad. What is your confidence in our counterintelligence, counterterrorism people?
Well, my experience was good. I understand that people have different experiences. We had occasional problems with the FBI who had suspicions about Israeli intelligence agencies, and that was always a challenge I had in Washington. I know that that's been cleared up over the years. But they have to invest far more in the search for domestic terrorism. I worked with an organization called the Secure Community Network for several years. It's an organization out of Chicago that monitors threats to about 12,500 Jewish institutions across North America. And it employs about 90 former FBI agents. By the way, the vast majority of them are not Jewish. They're deeply dedicated to the mission. And the Secure Communications Network, Community Networks, interacts, the liaison with the FBI. And that relationship, I know, is very, very fruitful and effective.
Now, there was a time that one would immediately connect two terrorist operations on the same day with a larger organization. We're not doing that. We're more hesitant. What do you put that hesitancy down to?
Well, it could be political. So you don't want to emphasize the fact that we in the West generally, in the United States specifically, you are facing an organized Islamicist threat. I know that, for example, some of the attacks against individual Jews were carried out by Islamicists, and when they're reported in the press, they don't emphasize that fact. So certainly, I think in the woke segment of the population, it's just what they call radical extremism. One of the great euphemisms of all time.
Yeah, last night in New York City, there was a pro-Hamas demonstration on the same day as the largest terrorist attack in a decade occurred in New Orleans. I don't know what the First Amendment permits demonstrations of vile people, but there is a point at which time, place, and manner restrictions have to be tightened and made more important. Now, Dr. Orrin, I want to ask you about the collapse of the hostage deal. It's not really a collapse if it was never there to begin with. And I don't think it was ever there to begin with. Do you?
My gut feeling says no. As I always say, I never knew if there was a deal on the table. I'm not even sure there is a table. And I'm not even sure who's calling the shots on Hamas side. But clearly Hamas is going to hold on to the hostages until Israel basically says, we're finished, we're out of here. It's going to be a permanent ceasefire. We're going to withdraw our troops to the international border. Hamas will then will then emerge from the tunnels, give the victory sign, and begin the process of reconquering the Gaza Strip and killing anybody who tries to oppose it. That is the issue, which is why the Israeli government said, okay, we're willing for a temporary ceasefire in return for a certain number of hostages, and the emphasis has been on living hostages and not dead hostages. And Israel is willing to release a certain number of Palestinian prisoners in our jail, but it depends who. You can't necessarily release someone who's killed 50 Israelis.
I just think we've got to prepare our audience. I don't expect these hostages to be home except by the operation of the IDF and getting them. That's my expectation, because these are terrorists and they're desperate rats now, caught in small tunnels, small enclaves. This morning, 6 more were killed in an Israeli airstrike, according to the latest Times of Israel report. Dr. Orrin, I want to talk to you about Prime Minister Netanyahu. Can you hang on for 5 minutes while we go into the break?
Sure.
Because it seems to me it is obvious that the leader of the West for the last 2 years has been Bibi Netanyahu. There is nobody else. Not Trudeau. It's not Macron. It's not Joe Biden. It's not Olaf Scholz. There is help on the way. Pierre Poilievre from Canada is coming. I think Merz is coming in Germany. Trump is coming. But Netanyahu's been out there basically alone for a year and a half. And I want to talk with Dr. Orrin about what does it mean that Yoav Gallant has quit in Israeli politics. He used to be the defense minister. He just quit yesterday. I am back with Dr. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Dr. Oren, I've been saying for a couple of months now, after it's become clear that Joe Biden is infirm and impaired, that the leader of the West for the last 15 months has been Bibi Netanyahu since 10/8. And I gather he's doing better in your opinion polls. But his colleague was Yoav Gallant, who quit the Knesset yesterday. Were you surprised?
No, I was surprised that it took that long. But just a word about Netanyahu and his defense of the West. I think it's not just Netanyahu. I think the state of Israel has defended the West.
Yes.
And I've mentioned this many times before on this program. We had 365,000 reservists called up. These are people who left their families, left their jobs for hundreds of days of combat service. 365,000 Israelis is the equivalent to about 20 million Americans. And that's like 4 million Americans more than fought in all of World War II. And I asked myself, is anybody willing to pick up a gun and defend Belgium or Luxembourg? Is anybody willing to pick up a gun and defend even Spain and Italy today? And you don't find a country like this. So it's not just Bibi. This entire country was willing to go out and fight for our homes and fight for our values, fight for a way of life, which is denied completely by our enemies. Everything we hold, every value we cherish, they hate and want to destroy. And it's not just our values. It's America's values. It's the West's values. So Israel has been standing up and fighting for the West. As for Gallant, I'm surprised it took that long. He's a formidable person. I know him quite well. And we sat in Knesset together, and I have a very good relationship with him. I don't know what his future is going to be. He's going to try to be a contender to take over post-Netanyahu Likud. And as you know, that Netanyahu has had surgery this week. He had his prostate removed. He's still hospitalized. He's had a heart condition. So at some point, there's going to be a changing of the guard there. And there are a number of contenders. The question is whether in the Likud they'll forgive him. I always say to Israelis, Likud is not a party. Likud is a family. You're born into the Likud. And Likudniks don't take kindly to people who challenge the father of the family, the pater familia, which is what Bibi was.
And so in terms of Netanyahu is going to finish this term unless he's convicted. And I don't think he's going to be convicted now. If I can read anything about that trial, what about this attorney general who now wants to indict Sarah Netanyahu? Because I really do think your attorney general is out of control.
Well, people in the government seem to think so, and there are big posters in Tel Aviv in support of her. I've never seen anything like it. There's big posters in support of the attorney general, who's viewed as the bulwark against what this government stands for, many of the things that the government stands for. And remember, we have to see what the charges are. I don't know. I know what I read in the newspaper, that she's accused of inciting and threatening witnesses in Netanyahu's, in her husband's trials. I don't know. If it's true, this should be investigated. If it's not true, then action should be taken against the attorney general. She's exceeded her brief.
Well, what I don't understand, and please explain, the attorney general is appointed as a permanent government official and was appointed by the last government, not the Netanyahu government, and she just gets to bring up stuff at her own leisure. There are no checks and balances in a parliamentarian system. I don't know why she's still in the job, but is it because traditionally you don't fire AGs in Israel?
Never happened. And it's not like the Attorney General of the United States, who's basically appointed by the President and serves at the President's pleasure. It's an independent check on government. So think of the Attorney General being more like the Supreme Court than being a member of the President's cabinet.
Well, she's more like Jack Smith to me. She's just a force without any oversight. Am I right about that? That there is no oversight of her?
That's what I know of. No, they operate within certain parameters, and there is a state commission that oversees all of these different these jobs. State commissioner. I know even when I was appointed ambassador, I had to go through a number of interviews and tests by the state commissioner to find if I was competent, and they reviewed my performance.
All right, a last question, Michael, because it's the first conversation of 2025. Israel's been at war for 15 months. I think you've strategically broken Hezbollah, and Hamas is broken but not ferreted out. Where do you think we'll be in a year?
Well, the optimistic outcome is that the entire Middle East will be transformed. If I had any major criticism of the Biden administration during this whole war, is that the people in the administration didn't understand that they were in a moment. They were in a transformative moment. They looked at the war as something to be managed and not won. And in spite of that, we've won. We've won in a military way that will be studied at West Point for the next 100 years, because no army in history has ever faced what the IDF faced in Gaza alone, not the other fronts, the Gaza alone, and prevailed. And whether it's 30,000 terrorists in an area that has 2.5 million people in it and 400 miles of tunnel, no army ever did that.
Dr. Oren, I spent a couple hours with a field officer of the Marine Corps that, not yet a general officer, a field officer, who was dispatched to work with the IDF and observe, because it's the first time in history they've had above ground war and a below ground war. Stalingrad, some people thought, was both, but that's not really. That was just a total destruction war. This is the first time there's been a tunnel complex, and he said the IDF just amazed him at their ability to learn quickly and develop new tactics. Is that widely known inside the Jewish state?
No, it's not. And even when I tell you that the ratio of combatant deaths to civilian deaths is 1-to-1, which no army in modern history has ever come close to it. Not the United States, in Afghanistan, and Iraq, certainly. No one come close. And you're not going to hear that. You're not going to hear that in any major, mainstream media outlet. Israel killed 45,000 Palestinians. You're going to hear over and over again. War crimes. It's just the opposite. It's just the opposite. And that's only on one front. We're fighting a 7-front war. So no army has ever performed in this way. And we've transformed the Middle East. It's Hezbollah is withering on the vine. Hamas is degraded to the point of no return, hopefully. And Syria is disintegrated. Iran may fall. I mean, they have no electricity here. They have their plans for the schools aren't open. Everything could change here. But
and help is on the way.
Understanding the important thing is that there's somebody in the White House and people in Washington who understand that this is a transformative moment. This is not a moment to be managed. This is a moment to be harnessed.
Yeah, well,
maximalized.
Those people are coming. I think Mike Waltz. I think Bridge Colby. Of course, Donald Trump is a friend of Israel. But the big thinkers all are aware of that, and I'm very happy about that. Dr. Michael Oren, thanks for the extra time today. I hope I see you in the Beltway soon.
Happy New Year and a better, safe New Year to everyone. Thank you.
To you, too. Thank you, Doctor. Happy New Year to all of you. Although yesterday was a grim day, you might have diverted yourself with some college football. I did. I did watch Ohio State crush the Ducks. But throughout the day, I was watching to see if there would be a third attack beyond New Orleans and Las Vegas. Blessedly, there wasn't. I'm joined by Noah Rossman, senior writer for National Review. Good Thursday, Noah. Happy New Year to you. Your first thoughts on New Orleans and Las Vegas?
Well, the initial thoughts are that we didn't get lucky in this situation. It could have been a lot worse. Apparently, there were multiple viable explosive devices associated with New Orleans. The device that exploded in Las Vegas didn't do nearly the damage that it could have. Nevertheless, we got pretty good at rolling up these networks where individuals self-radicalize. We got the individual who was plotting, Iranian-linked individual who was plotting against Donald Trump. We got an election day plot linked to an Afghan national, which rolled up a similar plot that was going to be executed in France by a relative of that individual, similar thing in Sweden. So we know where these networks are, and we know what the propaganda problem is. Indeed, actually, State Department Representative Ian McCary in March was discussing the rise of ISIS outside of the networks where we control it in places like Iraq and Syria. And the big problems are places like Afghanistan, where ISIS-K is evolving, but more specifically North Africa. Places in the Sahel, like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, and Mozambique. It's about 60% of ISIS propaganda, he estimated, comes out of those regions. And we have very little influence in those regions. Those are black holes for us. And it identifies a problem from a national security perspective, which is that ISIS is not necessarily a Middle East problem anymore. It is a region-wide problem with a lot of the incidences that lead to radicalizations like this coming out of places where U.S. troops aren't and where our influence is very limited. And that's going to be a problem that the Trump administration is going to have to tackle early on.
When you have a successful terrorist attack, Noah, when we do, you and I and all Americans, there are many failures behind that. And we learned that in 9/11, how spectacular those failures were. But every time there's an attack, whether it's the attack on the Army base or the Orlando nightclub or yesterday, we are always looking at a failure of our counterintelligence, counterespionage forces. how long will it take to get confidence back in the FBI? And I don't think Althea Duncan did a lot of good. In fact, let me start there. I'll add this to it. Let's play the clip of the very first reaction of the United States government yesterday. It comes from FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge in New Orleans, Althea Duncan, cut number 6.
Kirkpatrick said we'll be taking over the investigative lead for this event. This is not a terrorist event. What it is
Stop right
now.
there. Now, Noah, I understand she's a black female, and a lot of crazy people are out attacking DEI. I think that's misplaced and simply wrong-headed. However, every FBI agent always seems to say it's not terrorism when the rest of the world knows it is terrorism. What is the problem there?
Yeah, well, the problem is she clearly got over her skis, and I can't get into her head and say what she was thinking. But as you imply, and I think you're correct to imply, that what we see from public officials in moments like these is that the impulse to provide accurate information, and even to tell you that we don't know what we don't know, is subordinated to the desire to influence public opinion.
Yes,
Prevent
exactly.
the public from
Well put.
reaching conclusions they don't like, and that's
Well
manipulative.
put.
And it saps trust in the public. Saps trust in the public enterprises like law enforcement and what have you. It would be nice if American elected officials, public health officials, law enforcement officials, you name it, had enough trust in the public to be able to be honest with them, to assume that they won't reach the worst possible conclusions and lash out at their surroundings incoherently and incoherently. And that seems to be what guides a lot of our public officials, the belief that the public can't really be trusted with information, especially raw information that we haven't fully.
Well, that's pretty good for cold. I came at Noah with that cold, and I've been struggling with this because it is a reflexive, almost impossible to avoid. Don't believe your eyes, believe me, and we're in charge here, and we'll get back to you. And then we don't hear anything. And what came to mind, Noah, is we don't know anything about the Las Vegas shooter. It's been years since the guy camped out in the hotel and murdered scores of people. We don't know anything about.
We know very little about the person who took a shot at Donald Trump.
Yes, I was going to
know what his motives were,
or the person in the tree who was going to shoot Donald Trump. I don't know how Kash Patel rebuilds confidence, but I'm beginning to believe you do need a profound disruptor at the Bureau, and I think Patel's got that reputation. I don't know him. What do you think?
I don't know either, frankly, and to the degree that. It's tough because I don't want to be unfair. I do think federal law enforcement has gotten very good, very adept at disrupting plots like these. And when things like this happen, we look around and we say, well, how could this possibly happen? What a disastrous failure on all levels. And it is. But it shouldn't discount from the fact that the counterterrorism apparatus in federal law enforcement in particular is reasonably adept. It's unacceptable that any plot ever makes it through, and we shouldn't accept that. Nevertheless, I don't want to indict the entire Bureau or any other counterterrorism apparatus within the federal government or local law enforcement for that matter, and say that they've gotten counterterrorism completely wrong. They haven't, really. What we've done is take our eye off the ball in a lot of parts of the world where the ISIS threat is reconstituting itself.
Let me put a question to you, Noah. Do you believe other people were involved in New Orleans based upon everything you've read and seen?
Well, law enforcement does. According to local law enforcement, I don't think it was working alone.
Evan Perez, let's play that clip, the opening of it, on CNN with Phil Mattingly last night, cut 14.
Well, the key question, obviously, is the help, the additional associates that the FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge was mentioning. And what we know at this point, Phil, is that the FBI has recovered video, surveillance video, that appears to show three men and one woman appearing to help put IEDs, what are believed to be IEDs, at locations in the French Quarter. Now, we heard from the FBI.
I don't know. I haven't heard an FBI person say that. Have you, Noah?
I have not, but these are early hours, and I've only been privy to so much information, so I have no reason to distrust that reporting.
Well, if there are other individuals, 4 people, putting IEDs around New Orleans, isn't that a major story that ought to be flooding every network?
Yeah, Yeah, most certainly. I mean, there is, as what I've read, there's investigations into connections between the Las Vegas event and the New Orleans event, and it seems likely that there are. And as we discussed previously, you roll up one of these plots, and then others emerge because they are linked. If they are linked to foreign sources, then they all have a similar provenance. Tom Homans, the incoming Homeland Security border czar, said on television this morning, apparently, that he believes we will learn soon enough that the suspects in these cases traveled abroad, certainly had contacts abroad. So it's likely that we can't rule out at this stage that this was an event purely inspired by self-radicalization, the sort of thing that we saw in 2014, 2015, where somebody would go into the subway system with a hatchet and attack somebody in the name of ISIS. That sort of very unsophisticated.
But the key question
is not what this was.
There's a key question. If such a videotape exists that the FBI has of 4 people placing IEDs around New Orleans, should that not be released?
So again, this extends. I can see the arguments one way or the other. I can see the argument for telling the public that and trusting them, and I can see the argument against it for assuming that if you tell people that we don't really know where these explosive devices are and there might be a lot more of them, you can inspire panic. So it's a sort of information that you should release selectively. What you should not do is tell people that nothing's going on, there's nothing to worry about here, that contradicts information that you already have available to you. That's the offense that I think we can say safely that is an abdication of your professional responsibility. I can see law enforcement not telling the public, there's a bunch of IEDs and there may be more out there and we don't know, go about your day, good luck.
I can't see them. I think they have to do the opposite. If they have any suspicion of a threat, they have to tell people. And if they have video of 4 people putting in the car, they have to let the distributed network of millions of people go to work to identify who they are. It just seems obvious to me.
Calls. Okay. Well, I think these are tough calls, frankly. I think you could definitely increase vigilance among the public, and that could be helpful. You could also foment panic in ways that disrupt economic conditions on the ground or disrupt individuals' lives in ways that are just completely unnecessary and unproductive. It's not a super easy call in my view. I can see your point of view though.
Yeah, the videotape is the one that's easy. I don't know about how to describe it, but you might not say there are IEDs around the city if you don't know that, because you don't know that. But you might say, we have this videotape, we would like to identify these individuals and play it. Honestly, I do think the credibility gap that goes back to COVID and before that, and the surrounding Trump prosecutions, Jack Smith, it's an enormous credibility gap, Noah. I mean, it's vast.
Yeah. To say nothing of the fact that, defense officials and the administration officials have been telling us that, this over-the-horizon strategy is really effective. We've rolled up ISIS networks. Sure, they're reconstituting in places like Northern Africa, but where it really matters, we've got our hands around this thing.
Reminding everyone, a week from Monday, I will be moving to 3 to 6 in the afternoon on the East Coast, noon to 3 on the West Coast, and different times in between. Don't forget the Hugh Hewitt Show as we move. I hope all of our affiliates make the move with us. Seb Gorka going into the White House to help with counterterrorism, and I am so happy to be going to the afternoons. I've long coveted that slot, long coveted that slot, and I will be there for the rest of my radio career, I expect, and my Salem News Channel career. I hope you're watching on the Salem News Channel this morning. Noah Rothman did indeed stay with me for a few extra minutes. Let's go back and play what Noah had to say. I'm back with Noah Rothman. Noah, we saw the President of the United States shuffle out yesterday, sort of read a statement, butcher it, and shuffle off without taking any questions. It's not a very inspiring moment. It's the collapsing final 2 weeks of a terrible administration. But I said I was going to ask you, and I went, how bad will we judge the Biden years?
If the Biden years register much reflection at all by historians 20, 30, 40 years from now, I don't think it will be remembered as an especially effective presidency. It may be remembered as a disastrous presidency, depending on what happens in the next 2-3 years as we look back on Biden's legacy and what he bequeathed his successor. But right now, it will be looked on by historians who I think we can safely say, as an aggregate, lean left, that they will try to massage a lot of the good intentions that this president took with him into office. But he executed all of them spectacularly poorly. And something I've been saying on the air recently is that while we've had these belated acknowledgments from people who spent years telling us Joe Biden was as sharp as a tack finally belatedly acknowledging the mental acuity problems that we've all been witnessing for years. Great, fine, good for you. But accompanying that is this note of revisionism where there's an element of, oh, but for the ravages of time. You know, Biden would have had a more successful presidency. Oh, but for forces way outside of anybody's control, this thing would have gone a lot better. Absolutely false. 100% false. Joe Biden would have took with him into office the exact same flawed assumptions about America's adversaries abroad and would have executed policies based on those flawed assumptions. He would have still been seduced by the historians around him who told him he could be LBJ and FDR all in one, and he would have tried to revise the American Social Compact with a giant piece of legislation, another $4 trillion piece of legislation that would have been killed by the members of his own party. All of that would have happened sequentially, regardless of whether Joe Biden was mentally acute or not. Likewise, he probably would have still outsourced his presidency to a lot of the progressives in the Democratic Party who convinced him of the need to violate the Constitution in a variety of ways: student loans, the eviction moratorium, the distribution of aid to individuals based on race. All of that was predicated not on his mental problems, but his delusions. He was delusional about the nature of American politics, the political landscape, and his own mandate. All of that would have unfolded without Joe Biden succumbing to the ravages of time. So
I believe that the big story of this
do their best to
administration,
massage the record, but it's not going to be a successful enterprise.
I do believe the biggest legacy is that his impairment was scandalously hidden from the United States. Very
It's by far the
last
biggest
bonus
scandal.
question.
It's by far the biggest scandal, sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's responsible
so-
for his failures of government. That's Joe Biden's fault.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Now, given all that we've seen, would you support a constitution? Whenever constitutional amendments are brought up, I just dismiss them as idiocy because they'll never pass. But I have one to propose. Exempting the current president and vice president and any member of the currently serving Supreme Court. No future president, vice president, or sitting justice shall serve beyond their 80th birthday. What do you think?
I'm not against it on the merits, but I also think it could deprive us of some people who are really sharp and really good in their roles. Like I'm thinking of Chuck Grassley, for example, who is...
He's a senator. I didn't include senators. Senators are different. Senators can do one vote a day.
But if he were elevated, but if he found himself in the role of vice president, he would probably execute the role just fine, even at his present age. I mean, there would be plenty of concerns, but it's different for every individual. One of the problems is that we don't have voters. We don't have a system with the two parties being what they are and partisanship being what they are. Is we don't have a system where voters hold these individuals accountable. You're supposed to in theory, voters are supposed to evaluate these politicians on their individual merits, right?
Well, think about that amendment, Noah, because that's the only one I'm pressing.
Kay Granger was a good representative. That's why she was still in her role until she became completely senile. She was serving her constituents well. And they didn't have a chance to evaluate
I just
her
think I'm not applying it to the legislative branch because there are a lot of people who can do it. Noah, got to run. Thank you, friend.
You got it.
New York Post reporting the FBI has ruled out the involvement of 3 men, 1 woman allegedly seen planting IEDs around New Orleans near terror attack. That posted last night at 7:11 p.m. My friend Schroeder, actually contributing to the show as opposed to grumbling, sent that to me. So they have said no connection. I would like to see the video myself, but we'll see. Here's my conclusion of my interview with Dr. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, which I conducted in between the first and second hour of the program today. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Dr. Oren, I've been saying for a couple of months now, after it's become clear that Joe Biden is infirm and impaired, that the leader of the West for the last 15 months has been Bibi Netanyahu since 10/8. And I gather he's doing better in your opinion polls. But his colleague was Yoav Gallant, who quit the Knesset yesterday. Were you surprised?
No, I was surprised that it took that long. But just a word about Netanyahu and his defense of the West. I think it's not just Netanyahu. I think the state of Israel has defended the West.
Yes.
And I've mentioned this many times before on this program. We had 365,000 reservists called up. These are people who left their families, left their jobs for hundreds of days of combat service. 365,000 Israelis is the equivalent to about 20 million Americans, Hugh, and that's like 4 million Americans more than fought in all of World War II. And I asked myself, is anybody willing to pick up a gun and defend Belgium or Luxembourg? Is anybody willing to pick up a gun and defend even Spain and Italy today? And you don't find a country like this. So it's not just Bibi. This entire country was willing to go out and fight for our homes and fight for our values, fight for a way of life, which is denied completely by our enemies. Everything we hold, every value we cherish, they hate and want to destroy. And it's not just our values. It's America's values. It's the West's values. So Israel has been standing up and fighting for the West. As for Gallant, I'm surprised it took that long. And he's a formidable person. I know him quite well. And we sat in Knesset together, and I have a very good relationship with him. I don't know what his future is going to be. He's going to try to be a contender to take over post-Netanyahu Likud. And as you know, that Netanyahu has had surgery this week. He had his prostate removed. He's still hospitalized. He's had a heart condition. So at some point, there's going to be a changing of the guard there. And there are a number of contenders. The question is whether in the Likud they'll forgive him. I always say to Israelis, Likud is not a party. Likud is a family. You're born into the Likud. And Likudniks don't take kindly to people who challenge the father of the family, the pater familia, which is what Bibi was.
So in terms of Netanyahu is going to finish this term unless he's convicted. And I don't think he's going to be convicted now. If I can read anything about that trial, what about this attorney general who now wants to indict Sarah Netanyahu? Because I really do think your attorney general is out of control.
Well, people in the government seem to think so, and there are big posters in Tel Aviv in support of her. I've never seen anything like it. There's big posters in support of the attorney general, who's viewed as the bulwark against what this government stands for, many of the things that the government stands for. And remember, we have to see what the charges are. I don't know. I know what I read in the newspaper, that she's accused of inciting and threatening witnesses in her husband's trials. I don't know. If it's true, this should be investigated. If it's not true, then action should be taken against the attorney general. She's exceeded her brief.
Well, what I don't understand, and please explain, the attorney general is appointed as a permanent government official and was appointed by the last government, not the Netanyahu government, and she just gets to bring up stuff at her own leisure. There are no checks and balances in a parliamentarian system. I don't know why she's still in the job, but is it because traditionally you don't fire AGs in Israel?
Never happened. And it's not like the Attorney General of the United States, who's basically appointed by the President and serves at the President's pleasure. It's an independent check on government. So think of the Attorney General being more like the Supreme Court than being a member of the President's cabinet.
Well, she's more like Jack Smith to me. She's just a force without any oversight. Am I right about that? That there is no oversight of her?
Not that I know of. No, I mean, they operate within certain parameters, and there is a state commission that oversees all of these different these jobs. State commissioner. I know even when I was appointed ambassador, I had to go through a number of interviews and tests by the state commissioner to find if I was competent, and they reviewed my performance.
All right, a last question, Michael, because it's the first conversation of 2025. Israel's been at war for 15 months. I think you've strategically broken Hezbollah, and Hamas is broken but not ferreted out. Where do you think we'll be in a year?
Well, the optimistic outcome is that the entire Middle East will be transformed. If I had any major criticism of the Biden administration during this whole war, is that the people in that administration didn't understand that they were in a moment. They were in a transformative moment. They looked at the war as something to be managed and not won. And in spite of that, we've won. We've won in a military way that will be studied at West Point for the next 100 years, because no army in history has ever faced what the IDF faced in Gaza alone, not the other fronts, the Gaza alone, and prevailed. And whether it's 30,000 terrorists in an area that has 2.5 million people in it and 400 miles of tunnel, no army ever did that.
Dr. Oren, I spent a couple hours with a field officer of the Marine Corps that, not yet a general officer, a field officer, who was dispatched to work with the IDF and observe, because it's the first time in history they've had above-ground war and a below-ground war. Stalingrad, some people thought, was both, but that's not really. That was just a total destruction war. This is the first time there's been a tunnel complex, and he said the IDF just amazed him at their ability to learn quickly and develop new tactics. Is that widely known inside the Jewish state?
No, it's not. And even when I tell you that the ratio of combatant deaths to civilian deaths is 1 to 1, which no army in modern history has ever come close to it. Not the United States, in Afghanistan, and Iraq, certainly. No one come close. And you're not going to hear that. You're not going to hear that in any major, mainstream media outlet. Israel killed 45,000 Palestinians. You're going to hear over and over again. War crimes. It's just the opposite. It's just the opposite. And that's only on one front. We're fighting a 7-front war. So no army has ever performed in this way. And we've transformed the Middle East. It's Hezbollah is withering on the vine. Hamas is degraded to the point of no return, hopefully. And Syria is disintegrated. Iran may fall. I mean, they have no electricity here. They have their plans. The schools aren't open. Everything could change here. But
and help is on the way.
Understanding the important thing is that there's somebody in the White House and people in Washington who understand that this is a transformative moment. This is not a moment to be managed. This is a moment to be harnessed.
Yeah, well,
maximalized.
Those people are coming. I think Mike Waltz. I think Bridge Colby. Of course, Donald Trump is a friend of Israel. But the big thinkers all are aware of that, and I'm very happy about that. Dr. Michael Oren, thanks for the extra time today. I hope I see you in the Beltway soon.
Happy New Year and a better, safe New Year to everybody. Thank you.
To you, too. Thank you. So I did get the name during the break of the suspected bomber in Las Vegas. His name is Matthew Leibelsberger from Colorado Springs, another Army veteran. There are some people posting on X that Leibelsberger served at the same Army base as Jabbar. I have not seen that confirmed by other than posts, and therefore I'm just passing it on as something to watch for. The Army vet who murdered 15 and injured 30, many seriously, the death toll might go up in New Orleans on New Year's Eve. It's actually January 1, not New Year's Eve. It was 3:15 in the morning. Was a Deloitte consultant. Time is of the essence. I cannot afford the house payment. It is past due in excess of $27,000 and in danger of foreclosure if we delay settling the divorce, he wrote to his former wife. He had racked up tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Law enforcement officials have identified Jabbar as the man who rammed the rented Ford 150 truck. He'd worked at Deloitte since 2021, a senior solutions specialist. His profile within the firm quoted an English translation of the Quran, saying that indeed the righteous will drink from a cup whose mixture is of kafar, a spring from which the servants of Allah will drink. This will make it gush forth in force. They fulfill vows and fear a day whose evil will be widespread. On December 20th, he sent an out-of-office message until after January 1st. Deloitte, of course, saying they are shocked by all this. He had a promotional video for his real estate endeavor as well. I think we're going to discover not radicalization abroad, but mental schizophrenia at home, aggravated by a number of factors, including financial distress. But the alleged connection between he and the Colorado Springs attacker in Las Vegas remains to be seen. Let me give you the market update. All right, we had a market open on New Year's Eve for half a day. Doesn't really tell you much. They went down 0.07% on the Dow. But this morning, futures look great. Gold is at $2,654 an ounce this morning. If you're buying gold at the end of the year and the beginning of the new year, you got a year-end bonus and you want to put it into Krugerrands or Maple Leaves or American Eagles, that which does not wither. All right, it's not Bitcoin. I'm not a big fan of Bitcoin. I don't understand it. I don't think you ought to buy it unless you do. It's just gambling if you don't. But I understand gold. Gold has more than kept pace with inflation for the past 100 years. It's not exciting. It's just reliable. It is something that if you buy, you ought to buy on a dollar cost average basis, meaning the same amount every month or every quarter or every year, and do it with our friends at American Federal. You go to AmericanFederal.com or you call 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Talk to Nick Grovich or any of his team. Talk to them about how to do the dollar cost averaging. You send them the same amount of money every month or every quarter, every year, and they turn it into gold based on what the market price is. They are very transparent about their commissions. Love them, love them, love them. AmFed Coin and Bullion have been in the business for 4 decades. You can trust them. Happy New Year to you. Jim Talent is my guest. Good morning, Senator. Happy New Year. I want you to tee up on your thoughts when you saw Joe Biden sort of address the nation yesterday and then shuffle off?
Well, we've been watching it you for so long that, of course, it was not a surprise, and I can never understand how people who've been around Washington and have seen him, I mean, for the last 50 years, could possibly have believed he was not impaired. And this is not a political statement, I served with him. I believe I presided over the Senate once when he was speaking. Anybody who knew Joe Biden or had watched Joe Biden, I was there for the 2012 vice presidential debate with Paul Ryan, where Biden was sharp as a tack. How anybody could have watched that over the years and actually believed, and I think some members of the press convinced themselves that he was not impaired. It's simply beyond me. It's
it's scandalous. I don't think they persuaded themselves, Jim. I think they knew, and they decided it was better for the country to have an impaired president than Donald Trump, and they didn't believe that Kamala Harris could do the job. So the consequences of a political error in 2020 manifested itself in the largest media scandal ever. What do you make of my assessment?
Yeah, well, you're right, although what I will say is when you devalue truth consistently and uniformly, I think there comes a time when you are yourself unable to know what is true and what isn't. I mean, there's a lot written about this. It's part moral, it's part psychological, but for whatever reason, it's an absolute abdication. How the press, which is supposed to tell the people what is going on, could possibly have ignored this month after month after month.
Yeah, Jim, there was a moment on New Year's Eve before the tragedy struck in New Orleans when a stand-up comic was roasting CNN on CNN's show. I've only seen the clip. I don't watch television on New Year's Eve. And the comic said, I've been playing smaller venues, small clubs, but bigger audiences than CNN. And they said, ouch, and it was funny because CNN's audience is so low. But I do think we are in the middle of a collapse of legacy media. And by collapse, I mean just a complete loss of audience because they will not recognize what Dwayne and I were talking about on Friday or on Wednesday. The first step in any 12-step program is you have a problem. They don't realize they've been hiring on other than talent for 30 years, and their problem is it's a terrible product, and they don't ask the right questions. Can it be saved or fixed?
Well, yes. The first thing you do is you acknowledge and you accept responsibility, and everybody do that personally. And then you commit yourself to the twin goals of truth and transparency. And this relates to what you've been talking about regarding what Kash Patel's got to do with the Bureau. The first thing is to commit themselves to truth and transparency. You're not going to say anything that isn't true, and you're going to err on the side of transparency unless it's absolutely impossible. You and Noah were talking about, this is a hard question. Do we be transparent with, but for now we are erring on the side of transparency. You use language that describes material reality. It is radical Islamic terrorism. It is not radical extremism. You use language that is meaningful to people, and you regain trust gradually over time. It takes a long time to build up trust, but you can lose it very quickly. So
it's gained in ounces and lost in pounds. That's what people always say. Trust is gained in ounces and lost in pounds. Let me play for you the first reaction of the FBI, the Assistant Special Agent in charge, Althea Duncan. I do not blame her. She's young, but cut number 6.
Kirkpatrick said we'll be taking over the investigative lead for this event. This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices.
All right, Senator, I'm not going to. She changed her tone in about 3 hours. She was as nervous as could be. She's in over her head. But she has been trained to say it's not a terrorist event. That's my only. They're all trained that way.
That's the point. That's the point. That was programmatic. I mean, that's policy in the Bureau. You say this is not a terrorist event. When what the least she should have done, I think, under the circumstances, was say we don't know at this stage what the motive are, and then she could have discussed the signs. He was sporting a flag, an ISIS flag. So there are indications, but we don't know. In other words, truth and transparency to people. But the Bureau has been programmed in many contexts not to do that. I'm like you. I mean, I started my political career, my career in Washington with great respect for the Bureau. I don't have it anymore. And Kash Patel has got to establish priorities. He's got to quickly identify and get rid of the people who are going to fight him. And he's got to bring in people who are committed to his priorities. And he needs to do that, and I'm sure he will, in a way that is not partisan or political in his respect. So, and there's no area where that's more important than fighting domestic terrorism. I mean, you have
Jim
to have
Talent,
the
if you'll
respect
stand by, I'm going to abuse your time this morning because I want to talk to you about how does one change an organization. Very few people have the ability and the training that Jim Talent does. Former senator from Missouri, head of national security studies at the Reagan Institute. Long ago and far away senator. President Reagan nominated me to the deputy director of OPM, and I was confirmed, and I became the deputy director after being the general counsel for a long time, and I stayed to be the acting director after Connie Horner left. So I know OPM. I also know OPM has got maybe a half dozen political appointees. They've got some senior executive service people. They were quite good in my day, which is a long time ago, but you can't fire them. I want people to understand, Kash Patel can't come in and fire SES people. He can move them, he can reassign them, but it takes a while to figure out who your friends are. Do you think the conservative movement, MAGA or GOPE, then that's the two ends of it, do they have any idea how hard this is to turn a federal government around?
Oh, yeah, in part because, and here we have an advantage, the president's been there. I mean, he did this the first time. He knows the difficulty. People like Susie Wiles know the difficulty. I studied this in the context of the Department of Defense, which is different because you do have more direct authority over a larger number of people in the department. But basically, you need to make your priorities clear, including to all the career people. And you need to really think through those. What are my priorities going to be? What is it I want us to do? What is it I don't want us to do? Then you canvass your authorities that you have over people. It was always my belief, that you make the priorities clear and then take a little time to see who is honestly trying to go along, even if they don't agree with you politically. And then you isolate the people who are really going to be the resistance and the troublemakers. And you deal with them using the authorities that you have, which could include, as you say, transferring. I think they need some innovative ideas. Like, for example, if some regional head of the Bureau issues some memo that we should start spying on Catholic congregations, and you remember that happened in Richmond. I think I might do something. Yeah, if I was Patel, I might say to them, you know what I want you to do? I want you to go down to the diocese. I want you to make an appointment with the bishop, ask him if he'll participate in this. Call the press, and you publicly apologize. In other words,
I like that idea. I like that idea.
Yeah,
I think that
you do it.
Kash Patel, if he sits down and spends an hour in conversation with every senior executive at the FBI, and the SES is an unusual organization. It's part of the 1978 Personnel Reform Act that Jimmy Carter oversaw. But you can move people, but you do need some career people. It's very difficult. Now, what I wanted to ask you about, Jim Talent, is we have three big thinkers coming in to the second Trump administration on national security. Over at the Defense Department, Bridge Colby is going to be the Undersecretary of Policy. I assume Pete Hegseth is going to be confirmed. The deputy is going to be confirmed. But the big think job is the Undersecretary, and that's Bridge Colby. Michael Waltz is going to become the National Security Council, and there's a lot of operational stuff there, but it's also the big thinker. And then Michael Anton is heading over to PPO under Michael Rubio, and a policy planning office is usually the big think plank. What do you think comes out of these three people's big think orientation at the beginning of Trump 2.0?
Well, that's a good question. There's no question that that they are going to emphasize that China is the pacing threat, and the reason is our margin of error in dealing with China, because they are so powerful, because they have gone so far down the road of perfecting conflict in so many different domains, we have to understand they don't think of conflict just in the kinetic domain. They also understand it in the narrative domain, in the economic domain, in the domains of sharp power, et cetera. So I think the three of them are going to work together very well to develop a plan for how we, first of all, strengthen short-term deterrence in Indo-PACOM so as to prevent this breaking out into actual, kinetic warfare with the United States. And then second, working with organizations like Commerce and the Trade Representative, how we organize the tools of power so as to contain, and I don't know whether they'll use that word, but to contain China and then win this conflict with China, which is likely to go on for many, many years. I think that will include defining what victory is, and I think it will include how we have to change the architecture of national security. How do we have to update the Cold War architecture? And you're right, these are very, very strong thinkers as well as effective and decisive people. So one key to this, and this, if you're the president, I would imagine he's on this, and Susie Wiles, they have to play well together. You know, the old thing about, did you get good grades in kindergarten for playing well in the sandbox together? It's important that these key players have good personal relationships. And I know they know each other. I think they go in with those relationships, and I think they'll continue them.
So, Senator, what is realistic for people to expect about, for example, the allocation of the Department of Defense budget? It seems to me it's clear that we've got to break the one-third, or maybe it's 31%, 31%, 31%, what's left over for Space Force. Do we have the people in place to take the deep breath and say, all right, the Navy is where our chips are going for the next 4 years, and we're going to invest at every level in the Navy's modernization and its capacity? Do you think they have that ability to do?
Well, first they have to make that decision. I think the decision is going to occur almost by default. It would be better if it was more purposeful because, again, China's the pacing threat, and Indo-PACOM is a maritime and an air domain. Now, part of the problem here, as you know, is we are making up for what is literally decades of underfunding and underperformance in recapitalizing the Department of Defense. The Navy, of course, is an example of that, but the other services are the same. So there's not enough money to go around, and we don't have the industrial base in order to spend all the money we ought to be spending, assuming we could appropriate it. So they're going to have to do things. They're going to have to do what they can do, not raise expectations too high, and aim at rebuilding the defense industrial base, strengthening short-term deterrence. And that is going to include, I think, beyond question, more money for the Navy, even if some of the other services suffer.
And when we say more money for the Navy, though, and by the way, are you pressed for time, Senator? Because if not, I'll keep you for one more second as we talk about this. Have I got time with you?
No, that's fine.
You are fine, good.
I just glanced down at the clock. I'm okay.
I want to talk a little bit about how one would set up a strategic approach to the necessary reform at the Pentagon budget. Senator, the Undersecretary of Policy, Bridge Colby, he's designated, he'll get confirmed. What's his job? What do you understand the Undersecretary of Policy to do?
Well, statutorily, it's to represent the equities of the Department of Defense in foreign policy decisions and supervise a collection of intelligence to that end, et cetera. So if there is a crisis in the Middle East and there's a discussion about whether we need an aircraft carrier task force in the Eastern Med, if the secretary, doesn't represent the department, then the under will do that. As a practical matter, he participates in foreign policy decisions of the administration on behalf of the Department of Defense and maintains a staff that enables him to do it. That's one of the reasons it's really important that he works well with the Department of State, because you don't want a turf battle developing. But with somebody like Bridge,
go ahead. You were going to say something about Bridge Colby.
Somebody like Bridge Colby, who is well known and respected, and also known throughout the administration, then he may exercise a more outsized role. I mean, again, he has to work carefully with the secretary and the DepSec to that end. Again, what we hope is that, and I believe this will happen, and I think Hegseth is very oriented in this direction anyway, is that they view themselves as a team and they don't have to silo everything out according to strict, statutory designations.
But if I'm just talking in generalities for the benefit of our audience, the SecDef is operational. He's chain of command. Secretary Hegseth takes orders from the president and transmits them to the combatant commanders and has big picture discussions with the Joint Chiefs about what to do. The DepSec runs the building, runs contracting, and they got a really smart guy coming in to do that, Feinberg. And then the Undersec for policy is supposed to be the big thinker. Over at State, Marco Rubio runs day to day. He's constantly on the road doing diplomacy. The DepSec of State runs Secretary of State, and then the head of PPO is supposed to be the big thinker. And then Mike Waltz is supposed to be both operational and big thinker. To your knowledge, do they ever just sit down and agree, we are going to do this about that for 4 years? We're committing to shipbuilding, we're committing to the Navy. Do they ever do that sort of exercise?
Oh, sure. The first thing they'll do is a national security strategy. And they'll all work together on that. And then there'll be, the president obviously has the final decision in all of this. And we have a very active president in terms of, well, across the board, but especially in terms of foreign policy. So Donald Trump's going to be making these decisions. But you get a national security strategy. From that, you write a national defense strategy that incorporates your priorities. And that's where you'll see the priorities for all of the services, and in particular for the Navy. Now, the Secretary of Defense is the head both of the operational part of the Department of Defense and the build and sustain mission, which in my opinion is more crucial now. And in other words, building up the force, sustaining it over time, we need to build up the tools of power. Policy is important. Operations are obviously important. But if we don't have ships, we don't have any judgment to make about where we're going to send them. And I think that's where Hegseth and the DepSec are going to be spending a lot of their time personally, and I hope they do. We need a Secretary of Defense who says, my job is to do what Cap Weinberger did. I'm going to rebuild the force.
And that, boy, would that be welcome. But it would require a cross-departmental commitment, and you'd have to have Russ Vought, who is going to be the OMB director again, in, right? I'm backing into the point that OMB ought not to drive policy. OMB ought to execute the decisions of the president and the national security team. Agree or disagree?
I agree, and I'll say two things. In the first place, that's where the Office of Secretary of Defense, and in particular the Secretary himself, needs to have a strong relationship with the president, so that the president makes clear to OMB, look, needs are driving the budget. The budget is not driving how we define need. That's number one. And number two, the people you have not mentioned so far that are absolutely crucial to this effort are the service secretaries and the chiefs. 3/4 of the money the department spends is spent through the services, and the service secretaries and chiefs have the statutory authority in terms of how they're going to spend the money. So whether we are able to rebuild the Navy, whether we're able to recapitalize the aircraft in the Air Force, including unmanned, whether we're able to get the Space Force off the ground and harden and diversify and disperse the architecture, that's going to depend a whole lot on the service secretaries and the chiefs. So they need to be empowered, they need to make decisions, and they need to be held accountable by the Secretary of Defense. And
so Jim Talent, I'm going to upset every single listener who's a member of the Army right now, and maybe some Air Force people. Would you welcome Donald Trump directing everyone on day one, we are breaking the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 model. We are going to a 40% Navy, 30% Army, 30% Air Force. Just do it. And do not bring me a budget that does anything other than that. Just do it. Would you welcome that direction?
I would certainly welcome the president saying, or the secretary saying, once he's confirmed, we're not going to have some arbitrary formula for dispersing money. This is not a question of turf battles within the department. This is a question of what are the primary threats to the United States? What is the role of the Department of Defense in combating those threats? and what are the priorities that we need to fund. Now, I think that will result in greater money for the forces that are primarily responsible for Indo-PACOM, which is the Navy, number one, Air Force, and then, of course, we have to continue building up and protecting the space architecture because everything depends on our ability to communicate. Now, I don't
space
know
and
that,
cyber.
and I certainly, yeah, space and cyber. Now, if I was a SecDef, I would probably say to the president, I'll need your support on this, but I'm the one who ought to be directing this. And I think Donald Trump would agree with that. I don't think Trump wants to get into percentages for this or that or the other thing. I think he wants his Secretary of Defense to run the department, to prioritize what he's doing, and to hold, again, the service secretaries accountable for accomplishing their priorities. If you get John Lehman on the program and ask him how he rebuilt the Navy, he'll tell you he established a tight chain of command within the Navy, and he held everybody accountable. I mean, that's
what
it comes down to.
Secretary of the Navy,
that's more important.
The new SecNav is a guy named John Phelan. I don't know him, very, very successful businessman and investor. I'm hoping he brings those business chops to this. But I do think they need a declaration at some point that it's the Navy. We are a naval power. We've got to go back to the fact that we are a naval power, and we have to go TR or FDR or Ronald Reagan. And I wrote about this last week. It's the legacy that Donald Trump should reach for. He's got judges. He'll have another Trump economic boom. But rebuilding the Navy, he said he was going to do it in the first term, and it didn't happen. Do you think if he starts on day one, that we would notice it by the end of term two?
Yeah. In fairness to the Trump administration, they didn't have the industrial base. I've said on the program here in so many different forums, power is the result of intention and capability. Intention can change quickly. Intention has changed, and it's going to change more. Capability can't. I can't flip a switch and produce a submarine. So they've wanted 2 submarines a year, attack submarines a year. I think for close to 10 years, Congress has been funding it, and they're getting 1.3 because they don't have the shipyard capabilities. So we have to rebuild the defense industrial base. It's not going to happen overnight. I don't think we should raise expectations of a 400-ship Navy at the end of this time. Now, there are things you can do quickly. Don't retire ships. See what ships you've got in mothballs. Establish a low-end line of ships. Our friend Jerry Hendricks is very big on this, something where you can produce a lot of ships quickly. So you can use the smaller yards that right now we're not using. So there's a lot of things that you can do, and I'm convinced they're going to look at it. I'm excited by what's going to happen. What scares me, is how much time we have. Because the Davidson window is upon us, basically. And so I think short-term deterrence, things like Mike Gallagher's talked about, the anti-Navy, asymmetric things we can do to send the right message to China that, look, don't try anything with Hong Kong, because not only do we have the will, with Taiwan, not only do we have the will, but we have the capability to oppose you. And I'm sure, watch the national defense. You watch the national defense strategy. The things you're looking for, you're going to see if they're going to be there in the national defense strategy.
Well, then they ought to do it within 2 months. I mean, we really don't have a lot of time here. Senator Jim Talent, thank you for the extra amount of dollop of time today. I appreciate it to start the new year off. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
I hope you enjoyed, in an otherwise dark day, the remarkable display of football prowess by the Ohio State University Buckeyes, crushing the Ducks. Every time they run into the Ducks, they crush the Ducks on a neutral field. I mean, they lost to Oregon early in the season. They crushed the Ducks yesterday, and they're on to crush the Longhorns in the Cotton Bowl next week. And then they'll take care of business, whether it's Georgia or Notre Dame or whatever. It's not, I don't know who it's going to be, who's left on the other side there. There's going to be 4 teams at the end of this. But one of them is the Longhorns, one is the Buckeyes, One will probably be Georgia. I think Georgia will probably beat Notre Dame today. Game's been postponed to 4 o'clock today, East Coast time, 1 o'clock on the West. Go Irish. I'd like to beat the Irish on the way to the national championship. I being the collective, everyone who's ever lived in Ohio rooting for the Buckeyes. My friend Schroeder was trying to bother me yesterday because he's a Tennessee fan, and of course the Buckeyes crushed them yesterday. But pebbles at a battleship. We cannot be deterred by the mental freeze that happened in Columbus on that cold day in November against that team up north. But yesterday was the real Buckeyes, and they're on the way to the Natty, as we say. Let me remind everyone out there that I have 6 more shows in this time slot. Tomorrow and all next week, I'll be here from 6 to 9 in the East and 3 to 6 a.m. in the West. No one knows me on the West Coast anymore, although when I've been out and about, everyone has been telling me they're very eagerly awaiting my return to live broadcasting in Los Angeles. I never mind moving the show, because in the new era, that just means people who listen to the show now just either migrate with me to the afternoons or they start listening to the podcast. I am very hopeful about the number of affiliates that will be carrying us. We have the most affiliates of anyone in the world right now. I don't know how many can make the change to the afternoon. I know I'm going to be driving the Beltway home. Already lined up my first guest for the first show. It's going to be fun. I just know that you need news every day. The news you need, the analysis you want, is always right here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. And beginning on Monday the 13th, I'm going to the afternoon 3 to 6 live in the East, noon to 3 live in the West. Check your local listings to find out where I am. And if you miss me, you can always find my podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh, at iTunes, Spotify, the Salem Podcast Network. You can also find Generalissimo's podcast, Dwayne's World, which he'll be now producing 5 times a week, I think. I think that's his plan. And putting that up. We'll do the air check every day for everyone on the universe. Also want you to please go to YouTube, sign up and like and subscribe, as they say at the Ruthless Podcast. Like and subscribe the Hugh Hewitt Show, and then you'll get every significant interview. Today's with Noah Rothman, today's with Jim Talent, today's with Michael Oren. I do the interviews as standalones on YouTube so some people can click through. Try not to overwhelm you, but I appreciate those of you who like and subscribe. I do read your comments on the YouTube post. I do read my subtext if you're a member of the universe. I don't get to the big box very often. That's Dwayne's business, to go to the big box, which is Hugh at HughHewitt.com. And that's just got 25 years of junk. But I'm here to tell you, we are looking forward to the new year, to the new Trump administration, to bringing you the news every single day in the afternoon, comprehensive review of the day's events, breaking news as it happens, of course, always, and the best guests in all of radio. My friend Levin likes to say I'm a rhino. What I am is simply an old hand. An old hand meaning I've been doing politics since 1974, and I have been doing presidential politics since 1976, and I've been broadcasting since 1990, and I've been teaching con law since 1996. And I'll give the whole bio. I just want you to remember, I'm going to be telling you every day between now and January 13th, I'm only on in the mornings for another week. Someone else, Chris DeGaulle, is going to drive you to work in the morning. I am going to bring you home from work in the afternoon or drive you around lunchtime on the West Coast. And finally, with a clear signal from coast to coast and a voice that is not the morning voice. I'm so looking forward to having back the afternoon voice to bring you just sweet reason, the news you must have, the analysis you need. Sign up for the Hugh Hewitt Show at YouTube. Sign up for my podcast. Sign up for Dwayne's World. Happy New Year to you. My first elected official of 2025 is Derek Van Orden, Congressman extraordinaire from Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District. 24 years in the Navy with the SEALs. He is the Senior Chief Petty Officer with the SEALs for 24 years. This is his 5th year in Congress, and he joins me this morning from, I believe, Washington. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Well, good morning, Hugh. I got to correct you for a second. I was in for 26 years in the Navy, but this is only my 3rd year in Congress.
Oh, I thought you had won twice before. Okay, well, then you're my sophomore representative. Congressman, I want to ask you about 2 things. One, the events of yesterday, the terrorism in New Orleans and what looks like terrorism in Las Vegas. Your reaction to both of those events. Do you think they're linked? What do you know?
I would say that they are tragic but completely expected. And the reason I say they're expected is because we've had 4 years of the weakest leadership imaginable under the Biden administration. They have run a lawless regime. They have put politics above the security of the American people, and it's beginning to show. And unfortunately, I believe that we are in store for more of these types of events. You simply can't allow 20 million unvetted people into the country and expect that even a small percentage of them would not conduct terrorist operations. And this is, of course, on top of the 170,000 plus unvetted Afghans that we brought in directly from a war zone. So are they linked? I'm not sure. Could they be linked? Absolutely. Was the first one designed to be a signal to President Trump? Potentially. Was the second one? Absolutely. When you ignite a VIVD, that's a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device that was designed by Elon Musk in front of a Trump hotel in Las Vegas, 100% that was designed to send a message to President Trump.
Now, both of the terrorists yesterday, and whether or not they're linked in their plane, they both were in the Army. They both self-radicalized. What do you put that down to? Do we have a study on what happens to people that go this direction?
You know what, Hugh? When General Milley and Lloyd Austin decided to have a task force to root out the white supremacy, the right-wing extremist groups in the military, and they came up with absolutely nothing. I wrote a letter immediately following an airman lighting himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy, demanding that Lloyd Austin set up a left-wing extremist task force. And if he had done that, these people would have been rooted out earlier. So the problem is it's politically correct to try to chase down Caucasian males serving in the military, and it is politically incorrect if anybody has any affiliation with a religion other than Christianity or they are not a Caucasian male. It is politically incorrect to even question them. And I believe that we're going to find out that this person, the one that committed those horrible crimes in New Orleans, was looked into previously, but they were concerned of chasing it down because they didn't want to violate some DEI crap that they had in the military. So the time for this is over. We need to look at people only as Americans and people that are patriotic and love their country, and we need to put aside all this other stuff, their religious affiliation, the color of their skin, any type of immutable characteristics they have. This is the United States of America, and we look at everybody equally. And this is an example of treating people differently because of the color of their skin, and it's inappropriate.
Now, so Congressman, I want to play for you the opening of the FBI's Assistant Special Agent in Charge, her first interaction with the media. Now, I don't want to come down on Ms. Duncan. She is obviously young. She is obviously nervous. Her voice is trembling. But she is trained to say what she says at the beginning of her first appearance, cut number 6.
Kirkpatrick said we'll be taking over the investigative lead for this event. This is not a terrorist event. What it
All right,
is right
stop. She is nervous, but she's trained to say this is not not even we don't know anything yet, just this is not a terrorist event. Why? Why are they trained this way?
Because, Hugh, if they admit what's going on, in this case, they're going to have to admit what's been going on for the last 4 years, and that's that Joe Biden and the permanent, I call it the Democrat Permanent Party. They've abandoned America. And they have to say that this event is not a terrorist event because then they admit that there's terrorism taking place in the United States. If there's terrorism taking place in the United States, why? It's because the FBI over the last 4 years has misallocated their limited resources chasing down our brother and sisters our brother and sister Catholics and also the moms and dads at school boards. So
the prime suspect is a rad-trad Latin Mass attending Catholic who happened to have spoken at a school board in the last 4 years. They're on the list, but apparently not these killers.
Right, and you know what? It would be funny if it's not true. So the FBI is so far off mission, so far off task, it's unbelievable. That's why we need that's why we need Cash in. That's why we need Tulsi Gabbard in for ODNI to make sure that these limited intelligence resources are focused on enemies of the United States, not people that disagree with you politically. That's why we need Pete Hegseth in as SecDef to make sure that the DoD is focused on lethality, not on DEI. That's why we need Mike Waltz in as a national security advisor to make sure that we shape these policies so that we're protecting American citizens. That's why we need our new Secretary of Homeland Security to prevent these people from coming in and getting rid of the people that are here already. So we need the A team to get on board now. And so if we can just shift real quick over to the political aspect.
Yeah, well, that's where I'm going. Let me set this up because I've got you for this and the next segment. Derek Van Orden is one of the Republicans who will be electing a speaker tomorrow, I hope. But it is not crystal clear yet that Mike Johnson is going to get every vote that he ought to get. Tell us what the situation is, Congressman Van Orden, because I like Chip Roy, but I can't believe he would vote against Mike Johnson at the beginning of this. What's going on?
Well, what Chip Roy and some other people in Congress, my colleagues, need to understand is that this is that Donald Trump got a mandate in November. They didn't. This is the America First movement. It's not the Chip Roy First movement. This is Make America Great Again. It is not Make Chip Roy Great. So Chip Roy was allowed to run wild for 2 years under this last Congress, and he was a disruptive contrarian. The reason that we weren't as productive as we could have been is because of Chip Roy. So they sabotaged bills in the Rules Committee, and then when they went to the floor, if they made it through rules, they would sabotage them by voting against the rule on the floor. And then Chip Roy had the gall repeatedly to go on the floor and yell to the skies about how unproductive we were as a Congress. And he was the direct reason why we were unproductive. So it's time to shine light on Chip Roy and his hypocrisy. So Chip Roy now is saying that he wants to make sure that he can push forward Donald Trump's agenda. That's just a lie. So he has been working against Donald Trump going back into the primaries. So Chip Roy needs to get on board. He needs to understand that he is welcome to be on the team, but there's no way in hell he's the captain of the team. It is not his agenda. It is an America First agenda. And there are so many things that need to be taken care of for this country, and one of them is not Chip Roy's ego.
Now, Congressman, explain to me, how many other people are there besides Congressman Roy who have evidenced doubt about Mike Johnson? This would be a disaster, by the way, if we don't elect Mike Johnson and get to work right away. We've got to get the reconciliation done right away. Whether it's one package or two, it's got to be done right away. Right. How many other people besides Congressman Roy are opposed to Mike Johnson?
Well, Thomas Massey and Victoria Sparks have been public about this. And if there's any other folks, I'm not sure what they're thinking. I don't get into, I don't chase down individual members of Congress, but I know that Victoria said that she has questions, and I know that Thomas Massey said that he's a hard no. If Thomas Massey's a hard no, that means every other person in the Republican conference has to vote for Mike Johnson if he's going to be elected speaker without Democrat votes. And here's the thing, man. I mean, call me crazy. I'm not sure when bipartisanship became bad, and I'd be happy to have some Democrats get on board. We need to understand, and the example of what took place yesterday twice should wake up everybody and understand that we are rapidly, due to Joe Biden's weak leadership, losing friends around the world, and we have to remember who our family is. And I fundamentally and categorically disagree with the vast majority of things that my Democrat colleagues do. I just think they are so far off base. But they're still American citizens, and we need to start working together. I mean, God forbid we have a global conflagration, and we can't even get together in the House of Representatives. So if that's what it takes, so be it. But
now,
again,
explain to me the math, Congressman, because I know we have a
218.
We need 218. We're going to lose Chip Roy, apparently, and Massey. Why can't we lose Sparks, Massey, and Roy and still win? Because I know Gates isn't there and he's quit. So the chairman of the Knucklehead Caucus is gone. But what are three enough to stop Johnson?
Yes, in fact they are. And you know what, I know Chip pretty well. He's got a lot of good ideas. I think he's going to come on board with Mike Johnson. He just needs to understand again that he's part of a team. Victoria's kind of a wild card. I mean, she wasn't even going to run for re-election. She made that public, and then she decided to run again. I think she's going to come on board also. Thomas Massey, he's his own guy, and he's a friend of mine too. I respect a lot of his ideas, but I just think that the methods that these folks are applying are not productive for the United States. So I want Chip to be on the team. I want Victoria to be on the team. I want Thomas to be on the team. And that's up to them to make sure that they are. And we have to understand that there's a new sheriff in town. Thomas was in Congress when Donald Trump was first elected. Well, things are significantly different now than they were then. There was a group of Republicans in the House of Representatives and the Senate that did not want Donald Trump in office, and they were not helpful at all. That has completely changed. Everybody, the vast majority of the majority of Congress, the majority of the Senate are on board with Donald Trump. And we know that we have to get on with the country's business. And anybody that is impeding Donald Trump's ability to execute his agenda is not helpful for the United States of America. And I don't give a rat's you-know-what if they think they're being principled, because they're not.
Now, Congressman, if you'll stand by with me, I want to continue the conversation after we go to break. I got to let my affiliates down the line go. I will post all of this, and Derek will be back on the other side as well, but we'll continue talking during the break. Don't go anywhere, America. Do make the mental note. The beginning January 13th, I'm moving to the afternoons. I'm going to drive you home on the East Coast as opposed to drive you to work. And I'm going to drive people around on the West Coast to lunch so that we've got complete coverage of all 50 states. Got to go back to work, get someone elected in the 47th CD. We need more congressmen, and my focus, my unerring focus, is always on building up the party of patriots. They can be Democrats once in a while, but we really have to expand the Republican majority so we don't do circus tricks like this every other year or so. Congressman, I have addressed the Republican conference on a few occasions. There are very few senators compared to the number of congressmen. I haven't been back to a House retreat in probably 10 years. Does anyone ever stand up and tell the conference what jackasses they look like when they can't even get their act together on the speaker? Does anyone ever speak truth to the conference that they disappoint every Republican when they can't act like a group?
Well, you may be shocked, but I do on the regular. Yes, what's interesting is that I work for the people of the 3rd Congressional District of the state of Wisconsin. I mean, they're my boss, right? I have 850,000 bosses. And
yes.
When I talk to my folks here at the grocery store and at Quick Trip, which is this awesome convenience store here, gas station sort of stuff, they just want us to work together. And so you do have these people that are so insular that they think they're representing their people, and honest to goodness, they're not. And we need to have people that speak truth to power all the time. And there are several members of the conference, and we stand up. We actually call it conference. We have open mic, and we talk to each other and say, look, man, we look like buffoons. And when I say we, I don't mean the majority of the majority. There's a small portion of people in our conference that just make the Republican Party look like buffoons. And they need to understand that. And there's a bunch of different reasons why they're doing this. Some of it.
Well, that's what I want to unpack with you, Derek Van Orden. I don't understand. You go to Congress to get things done. The only way that Republicans get things done is with a budget and reconciliation. It's the only way to get things through the Senate. And that's a good thing. It should be hard to move things. But to do that, the House has to operate as a conference. What do people say? Massey drives me crazy. I think I'll go out on a limb and say he's at least anti-Israel. He's not a good guy. I do not understand him at all. But Chip Roy is just a budget hawk who maybe he's fallen in love with the limelight. I don't know. What are their motives?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Some people like listening to the sound of their own voice. When you grow up and, you don't get a lot of attention, and maybe you're not the most popular kid around, and you haven't really done a whole bunch of stuff in your life, when people start asking you questions and listening, that can become it's seductive. So there are folks that want to stand on the Capitol steps and have 100 microphones and TV cameras in their face, and they kind of lose the vision of why they went to Congress to begin with. So Congress and politics, I've been in politics now for 2 years. I've been in office. It's a team sport. And the people that you see oftentimes, and I'm not putting it like Jim Jordan, for instance, he is on television regularly, and that guy is a rock star. You look at what he's doing, he is really working incredibly hard. And it's not about Jim Jordan being on TV. It's about Jim Jordan conveying a message from the Republican conference to the American people to keep them informed about what's going on. That's what the media should be used for, right? But you do have these other folks that they want social media followers, and they think they're a cast member on a reality television show. And that's not why I went to Congress. I went to Congress because the guy that was representing me voted to impeach Donald Trump for the Russia collusion hoax. I did human intelligence for over a decade in the SEAL teams. I read the SEAL report once and said this is a BS politically derived document. So politics should be incredibly boring. It should be making sure that the country is safe, making sure that we have roads and bridges, making sure that the other common carrier things like the railroads work, making sure that there is a level playing field for everybody, that we have an agricultural industry that is functioning so we can feed our people. And all the rest of this stuff is just garbage.
Does the Republican House Conference have a sense of urgency? You were in the teams for 24 years, on the SEAL teams. I am very worried that we are going to wake up and see an invasion of Taiwan coming, that we're going to wake up and find terrorists in the country. Is there urgency in the conference, Congressman?
I would say the majority of the majority has a real sense of urgency. There's going to be some outliers. You know, we've been talking about Chip and some other folks here this morning that I think have lost the bubble, that they're not looking at the big picture. They're not understanding the fact that the United States right now, we're at an inflection point in history, like right now. And if we don't act cohesively as a unit, meaning the House, the Senate, and the White House, we're going to have some really, really bad times ahead of us. And I don't mean to be a doom and gloom person, but people better stand by for heavy seas for a few months here. And I think that what took place yesterday is going to take place around the country on a more regular basis until we get things in hand. So, in fact, yes, my friend, the majority of Congress understands that we need to get working now for the American people.
Well, please keep coming back, Congressman. I find your candor refreshing, and I am glad you do not hesitate, without rancor, but to call out people who are in the way. I appreciate that. Happy New Year, Congressman, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you, Derek Van Orden.
Very well. God bless you.
You too. I want to remind everyone that the 10-year Treasury this morning, the first day of broadcasting live in 2025, the 10-year Treasury is at 4.53%. So if you're out there buying a house because you have to move because you're going to D.C. with a new member, or you're doing something that corporate America has asked you to do, remember AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, the very best in the entire country. They're going to follow me to the afternoons. We're going to teach other people. Thousands of you have financed the purchase of your home or the refinance of your home, or gotten a reverse mortgage, or a veteran who wants to put nothing down, or a first-time home buyer who wants to use FHA. Sierra Pacific Mortgage is a bank. Andrew and Todd lend you the money. They underwrite the application. They walk through it with you piece by piece. They are infinitely patient. They are wonderful people. I've known them forever. They have done my loans. They've done Dwayne's loans. Thousands of you. You can trust Andrew and Todd at AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. New Year's resolution number 1, go to church 26 times this year. All right? Half of the Sundays. Not a hard thing. You don't have to do it. You can, if you missed your first Sunday's coming up, you got 52 more Sundays, just find a church and go 26 times this year. Great New Year's resolution. New Year's resolution number 2 is join Americans for Prosperity. Now, AFP is a sponsor. So if you go to americansforprosperity.org, you're going to a sponsor of my show. But the reason I want you to do that is they will keep the heat on our members, like I was talking with Derek Van Orden. They will help identify where the government can be shrunk, and it has to shrink dramatically. And they will build out the network that delivered Pennsylvania for Dave McCormick and Donald Trump. They will build out the network that delivered Ohio for Donald Trump and Bernie Moreno. They'll build out the network that got Tim Sheehy, Montana. Americans for Prosperity will be working for Tom Tillis in North Carolina, Susan Collins in Maine. I don't think we have any other Republicans who are in danger, but they're going to be working for, I hope, Brian Kemp running for Senate against John Ossoff in Georgia. Wherever there is a battleground state for the Senate, they will be working. Remember, the Senate determines the courts. The courts are going to be back on the right track under Donald Trump. But we need AFP, and we need you in AFP. And we need AFP. Akash will be here. We'll be looking at the first budget when it comes out. I want you to please be part of the solution, not part of the problem. You've been wondering what to do with your time, with your retirement, with your volunteer hours. AmericansForProsperity.org. AFP is the answer. AmericansForProsperity.org. You might also have made a New Year's resolution about exercise. I hope you did. Mine is the same as it was last year, 1,000 miles. I did 1,170 miles, right? So I blew past it 2 months ago. But started out with 4 yesterday. I'll get another 4 to 6 in today because of Relief Factor. And I'm in the Relief Factor Studio West. And Relief Factor makes it possible for me to broadcast any time of the day from any place in the country. And I move around the country a lot because I think journalists who are trapped in the Beltway in Manhattan just don't understand the country. So I like to go to both coasts. I like to go to Ohio. I will even go to Pennsylvania once in a while, despite the fact that I'm allergic to Pennsylvania. I want, it's because of the Steelers, as you folks know, but I want you all to know, if you want to feel great as you get older, you want to feel great as you do new exercise, you want to feel great as you travel a lot, and the dreaded overhead bin and all those different things, the new year is upon us. Go to Relief Factor and get started. All right, you will thank me. The 3-week starter pack is only $19.95. It's discounted. But to get it, you have to call the phone number, 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or head to their website and find that starter pack, $19.95. Thousands of you, like me, have been using it. The only supplement I've used for more than 20 years is Relief Factor, because it works. It really does work. Go to ReliefFactor.com and order it today, ReliefFactor.com. And I want to thank Harley and Adam and Generalissimo. We'll be back tomorrow with the last show of the first week of the new year, so don't miss that. And in the meantime, go over to YouTube, Hugh Hewitt, like and subscribe. Go to my Facebook page, and of course, the podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh, wherever you get your podcast.